Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's session, the Creatorspace Online Data Management for Digital Arts. Thanks again for joining us. We had to do a little bit of a shift. I thank everyone for coming back to join us. We had some internet issues a couple weeks ago, but here we are, we're back, and we're here to discuss data management and a lot of interesting topics, and we'll get right into it. Just want to thank all our partners in this project. So we have the Canada Council for the Arts, and we have our library partners. So we have the Blue Mountains Public Library, Collingwood Public Library, and then Wasaga Beach Public Library. And just of important note, you can access the computer stations. So we have the digital arts workstations, the iMacs are all in these libraries. So there's 2 in each library. They're 27-inch iMacs that are fully loaded with all the software that we're using and also with external hard drives. And that's what we're going to talk about today too. And it just, we had a course on this earlier. We had a session about the data management and best practices for when you're using the computers and the external hard drives and things like that. So really important to, you can always go back to that. We've posted that on our YouTube channel. So if you need to find anything, just go to tbmcs.ca. That's our website, and it has a link to our YouTube channel. So a major resource there, tons and tons of videos all about a lot of these digital topics and so on. So let's get right into this. So today we're going to cover a bunch of things. So digital data defined, we want to look at, what does that mean? What does that look like? Types of storage, hard drive formats, and data management. Then just overall data management. So local storage, cloud storage, and then project files versus projects. This question comes up a lot because sometimes in digital arts, there's a few different things that can happen. Some of the project files are essentially contain the whole project, and that's usually in more of the design type elements. So the illustration type elements, the other types of elements can be found there. So what's happening is the project files sometimes for something larger like video can be really massive, the media side of it, but the project file is tiny. So we're going to look at that because that's, I think, an important topic, and we've been getting a lot of questions on that. Then we're going to look at privacy with shared computers. What does that mean? How does that work? And what does that lead to? The main thing there is that you can really see how important it is that with you're protecting your data, and that's really what we want to get to, is protecting your data, because essentially your data is your digital art, or it's your raw original materials. So it's just like anything, you want to protect that. Just like if you're protecting a painting, you want to protect that actual asset of the painting. We want to protect the data, and that's really something important. So let's look at what digital data is. So let's define that. So with digital arts comes the use of digital data, which is also, it's the raw digital information. So this can include photographs, sound files like WAV files, or MP3 files, however you're recording sound, video images, so video data, so the actual recorded video files, each clip, each shot, illustrations, and essentially all the digital master files. So, and what does that mean? So you have your data, and then we have our digital master files. So that could be, for example, if you're doing something in sound, your digital master would be a wave, or like a broadcast wave. So a big high quality sound file like a wave. And then you might have an MP3 master and things like that. So you'd have some sort of a master, and that's like the final product. So that's really important, because that's just as important as your raw data is having that master data, right? So we want to make sure we have both of those elements taken care of, and getting that to work. That's really the important thing. So in terms of what we do beyond that, the master files need to be incorporated and into data management just as much as the raw files. So you're protecting the original stuff, you're protecting the master. Now sometimes you might say, hey, I'm totally finished with the project, so I don't really need to worry about the original raw materials. And that could be the case, and that's fine. But how do you then, what happens if you ever want to make changes? So really important question is, is this a one-time, are you totally complete, done with the project, and if you're done with the project, do you need to go back to those original files in the future, or maybe you're just done with the project and your master is all you need. So in the interest of space, sometimes you might say, hey, I don't want to even save that original stuff, but just be aware that if you destroy or get rid of that original raw data file, especially if it's videos or photographs, you can never go back and make further changes, right? So that's really, really important, is how do you maintain that? How do you keep that going? So the next thing too, then, if we look at the types of storage, that's, I think, really important, is the types of storage. So we have things like, hard drives, we have local, internal, and external. Those are our local based hard drives. So that's directly on the computer, and the external are the ones that you'll attach, and we'll look at that. Then we have media drives. So we have the cards. So the media drives are usually, that's what comes to our devices, our digital arts devices. So that could be our cameras, our sound recorders, so photo camera, video camera, sound recorder, the drive that actually go into the devices to record with. And the fun thing is that I'm going to look at that today too. We'll show that, is that you can use those as, a backup drive of sorts as well. So if you're somewhere using our digital arts computer and you want to save your project, and maybe you have just like a SD card, let's not forget that those are still very large. They could be 128 gig, 256 gig, small hard drives, flash drives, where you can put your data on that as well. And it's really small and handy. But with that, it can also be lost because it is small and handy. So that's the hard drives, media drives. Then we have our cloud drives, or what we know as cloud storage. So that's really the virtual storage that's not local. So that is what's out there in the cloud. So that's, you upload it through the internet, and then we're seeing that going to it goes to like a service, a server where there's multiple drives. It's backed up there, it's secured, it's stored, and it's a cloud storage. So this is a really good benefit if you do have space and you don't want to have everything on your local drives or external drives. You can be uploading to cloud storage and backing up your raw data there. What we're seeing now too is we're getting to the point where internet speeds are getting fast enough where we're starting to see the concept of that people editing now. I've been seeing this, especially photography is possible this way, but video editing now, there's an idea of a cloud shared storage where you can be editing, and we're going to see that more and more with high speed fiber type speeds of video editing that you could do with cloud storage. So you might not even have to have local storage. So, and then that access point is really unique, because imagine how you can then collaborate with people around the world in editorial or with a director and things like that. So that's a kind of an exciting advancements of where things are going and what things are looking like. So that's the really cool thing. So let's move along here. So that's the types of storage. So hard drives, this is the next thing. Hard drives, formats, and data management. This is really important because the hard drive is really important in getting the working with data, right? Like, it's all about your hard drive and making sure that works. So if you have the hard drives, you need to format them. They need to be in some sort of format. So they come in a pre-formatted format, and there's a exFAT is something that I like to call a universal format. So exFAT is a format that can be used on both Windows operating systems and Mac operating systems, and that's, I think, really important because it can go to both areas. So the Windows OS and the Mac OS, those two systems with exFAT. So if you're going to be using a hard drive on let's say you have a Windows computer and then you want to come and use our Mac computers, the iMacs at the libraries, you want to have it in exFAT format, because that way your Windows computer can read it and the Mac computer can read it as well. So it has that universal format. And it's pretty robust. I've been using it now for, it must be probably 10 years now I've seen it in use, and it works quite well, and really no issues with it. It can be read on both computers. Now, something just in terms of troubleshooting, sometimes people ask, okay, I'm having an issue with it on like on one computer. So what I'd like to recommend is, if you can, this is how the exFAT works the best. So if you, let's say your primary computer is the Windows computer, I would format it in the Windows computer. If your primary computer is a Mac computer, I would do that formatting in that primary computer. Sometimes I find that if you use it in the other ones, there can be some issues in reading it, but you want to always make sure that it's going to read in your primary computer where you're using it, so that your home computer or one of our computers, that's going to be your primary source working at the library computers through the CreatorSpace, and you want to do the formatting right there. It's available to do. So we'll look at that too. How do we actually do a format? I'm going to show that. So the next thing is, you know, if you're not going to be using it on one or the other, you can essentially, if you're not going to be using both, you can be using it in one or the other. You can just do a Windows format or a Mac format, and that's it. But just understand you're going to have issues then with, in terms of read-write. So, you know, a Windows drive, you can still read them. You can read them. You can't write them. So generally, most of the other formats they still can be read, but you can't write back to them. So that's something. It becomes like a read-only drive in a lot of the OS systems now, and it keeps changing and evolving. But again, if you want to be safe, do the exFAT format, and you go from there. And then, you know, the thing is to really, you know, label the drive, put your name on it. You can even put your address on it. You know, all of that kind of stuff is important. What happens if you lose, you know, because a hard drive can be really small. So this is like a small little solid state drive. We'll get to these demos examples, but you know, it's really small. So I always have like, you know, whether, you know, company name or the name of the drive. So I know organizing what it is. So this could be, you know, backup 2022, and just knowing that all my backup of 2022 will be on that one drive. And then you can go from there. One thing I'm starting to think about, and I'd like to put out there, and this is a question, feel free, you can email me, tom@tbmcs.ca, if you have opinions on this too, but I'm thinking more and more, you know, a lot of the cameras, so the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K that you can take out through our library partners, you can attach USB-C drives, so you can attach these solid state drives to them. The solid state drives, for example, this one's a 500 gigabyte one, is about $100. 500 gigabytes is a lot of data you can fit on it. That's usually at least 1 or 2 days of filming. So I'm starting to think, well, you know, what if you just treat this as negative? And you know, if you really want to do a real backup protection, what if you are, you know, actually doing, you know, using these as raw, as if it was like a negative. So you fill up the 500 gigabyte drive and then you just store it. And then you get another one, and you're just purchasing new ones instead of reusing them. So something to think about is that, you know, these are solid state drives, very safe and secure in terms of there's nothing moving in them. So the data has a longer archival shelf life, if you will. And, you know, that could be a way to work. So that's something I wanted to introduce is data management. Maybe you're using hard drives to, you know, do kind of one-off use, store them, and then you're, you know, let's say it's a video interviews, or it's 1 week of footage that you can store on one of these drives, and then you just store it, and then you have it like there. Then you would copy this over as you go to work on projects in editing or in any kind of work. You'd copy it over to another drive, so you wouldn't want to work off of this original material, and then you just keep this on the side and you store it and you archive it. So that's something of interest to think about, and can that work, and how would that work? Okay, so let's get back here. So the media drives, so hard drives, media drives, cloud drives. So, you know, what do we want to look at next? So hard drives, formats and data management, local storage. So this is I think the important thing here. So the local storage data management is really crucial, because it's what, so when I'm calling it local, I mean that this is something that is with you. So it's in your hand. So local storage. So this example I was giving would be the media storage, but the local storage would be things like, you know, your external hard drives. So things like these kind of external hard drives that you can store. So I think this is let me look at this, 4 terabyte external hard drive, right? But this is still local because it's with you. It stays with you, so it's still like a local external drive. Then there's the local internal drive. And the local internal drive is what the computer's using. So the you know, the operating system's on that, the software is on that, and so on. So I recommend yes, you can use that, but really start to think in digital arts, the files are big, the, the data can be a lot of data, and the internal drives sometimes are getting a bit smaller because we're updating and getting into this idea of, um, you're getting into this idea of using um, the hard drive for the software only, the internal hard drive, and it's a solid state drive. So we're starting to see things like 500 gig or 1 terabyte internal solid state drive. So that's kind of small if you think about it, because I can fill up a 4 terabyte drive pretty quickly with one video project, for example. So you wouldn't want to be storing it on that internal local hard drive. And if we start to think of the computers as, okay, that drive is for the computer to work, for the software to work, maybe it's for a little bit of rendering or cache work. So, having somewhere where it can kind of pre-compute, it could be used in that manner, and some of the rendering things, but that can get filled up really quickly. So I really caution you, if you, let's say you have a smaller hard drive, maybe 500 gigabytes, some even have 250 gigabyte solid state drives in like laptops and things. Really start to think about using the external hard drive as your local drive to work with, and that way you can scale it. So if you can add one 4 terabyte, add another one that gives you 8 terabytes, and then you can go from there. You can also do things like RAID drives, which are multiple drives that work together as one drive. So they're striped as one big drive. So for example, I have a drive that consists of 4 hard drives that are put together into a RAID formation to act as one big drive. So it increases the speeds, but it also gives me more capability in terms of how fast it can read and write, a little bit faster than the one drive alone, because there's 4 drives, so it can kind of move the data around. So something to consider too is that RAID drive versus just a regular internal drive. Now internal drives vary quite a lot too. So there's this one is still, this is a non-solid state drive, so this is a regular disk-based spinning disk hard drive. And then the standard really is the USB-C, so that little tiny one that you can flip around versus the USB 3 that was the older version. So everything's going to USB-C. So definitely go the USB-C or Thunderbolt 3 route. This is your fastest read-write speeds, and it works quite well. So this is a spinning one. So that's like a traditional hard drive. This is a solid state drive. So this has no spinning disks in it, and it's just going into a solid state data retention system, if you will. So that's the same as these kinds of flash cards that are basically like a solid state too, where just the data goes onto the card and it stays there, nothing's spinning on it. So the cool thing of data management in the archival steps is you want to think about, how long will this last? So the spinning drives have a limited life. They can be as short as 3 to 5 years, maybe 10 years. But after that, they always need to be backed up again because the spinning disk can fail. And you don't know when it will fail, but it can fail because it's still a spinning part and there's like a needle reading it, and it can get damaged, and then there's data missing and so on. You can do some recovery methods and stuff like that, but it's really important to think about the duration of how long it can last for. So the solid state drive, because there's no spinning parts, it has a longer, it's more stable, and it's more of an archival quality. So I think that's really, really important. So where do we go from next? So just wanted to pick up a couple extra drives to demonstrate with. So we have some, what do the different things look like? And I think this is the whole thing too. So we have this, we have these drives, the USB, it has that longer one. So you see that kind of longer port. So that could be like a USB 3 drive versus the USB-C, which would be the small one. So just kind of a comparison. You have that longer and the shorter. That's just good comparison. So, in terms of external drives, so again, now they're really small, they're getting smaller. These are what are called the LaCie rugged drives. What's cool about these is they have a shock resistance. So if you're traveling, let's say you're going to be, biking somewhere you're walking with drives. This one has shock resistance, so this can drop, I think, from 2 to 3 meters, and it won't break and it will stay in place, which is really great. And then, so that's with the shock resistance. Now, they also make solid state versions, and they get quite expensive. And I think that's really important in terms of data management is, this 4 terabyte drive will be, $200, and a 500 gig drive will be $100 in the solid state drive capacity. So they're a lot more expensive. They're getting more and more cost effective, but the solid state drive is definitely a lot more expensive, but it's probably 4 or 5 times faster than the spinning disk type drive, the older versions, the older type. And again, it has that longer archival ability. So really important things to think about in terms of your data management. So what do we do with the data? So what I always say is make sure all of this raw data, I alluded to this earlier, but that all your raw data exists in 2 places. So if you're working on a computer and you have like an external working drive, that's fine. And then I would also have it on another one. So as I said before, if you have, let's say you're archiving everything on solid state drives, then I would copy everything over to an external drive, work off of this one, and I wouldn't touch this one while you're working on your materials. And that way it protects all of this, and then it's there. So in case, let's say you deleted something by accident on this working drive, your backup drive or your original raw, archive drive has everything on it. And you would never do anything to that one. So don't work off of it. You're basically just copying it and then working on it on something else. That way, anytime anything goes wrong, you always can go back to the archive drive and find that missing data that maybe got corrupted or something. What if your drive, you just happen to lose it or it breaks? Then you still have this archive one. So this is really important. How do you store it? Where do you put it? So always store it in a dry, cool location. So it shouldn't be like in a hot zone. Garages are not good for hard drive storage, for example, because they get hot and cold. Attics, basements, things like that can be, different in moisture and things. So store it in a cool, dry place. So generally just in your house, if you're keeping general, regular kind of temperatures and with air conditioning, that's great. A little bit of heat won't hurt it. More than the cold moisture will be a lot worse for it. The solid state drive. So that could be placed in maybe a fireproof type structure for backups. But again, if it exists in 2 places, you're already protecting yourself by having it on an external drive that might be at a working computer or in another room or another place in your house. And then you have the archive drive as well. So that's the 2. So always at least in 2 spots, your data should exist. That's really key for your data management. Maybe if you're really concerned with something, you can even do a 3rd backup. It doesn't hurt because then it exponentially reduces any possible corruption or data loss. And that's really key for your data management. Another thing with data management, what's really important is having everything labeled and knowing what it is. So project names, dates, what kind of footage it is, as much as possible. As you can see, I do a lot of labeling on the outsides of the drive, so I know right away what it is, what it's referring to. Here it says webinar, so this has all our webinars that I'm recording to here. This one has a media shuttle, so it's a current project thing. This one says closed captioning, so it has all my closed captioning. So labeling is really important on the outside of the drive, so as you can get into it. And that's the key. I can find stuff relatively quickly. Within 5 to 10 minutes, I can find things from a few years ago on the drive. So think of whatever kind of system can work for you to label, organize. That really helps you. Otherwise, if you're storing data and it's going to take you days to find out where it is, that's not really effective or efficient, and you probably will just think it's lost and you might never recover it or even try to search for it. So that's really important. So we talked about the local storage and how that works. And the next thing is we should talk about the cloud storage. So cloud storage is that next level of, this could be the 3rd location where your data lives. If you have it on an archival drive, you have it on a working drive, and you could be putting it into the cloud storage. Oftentimes, I find myself putting more of just the master finals into the cloud storage of a project. So master video or audio file goes into the cloud storage where I can then find it and share it and move it along. And that way it's backed up. So cloud storage has its own backups as well. It has redundancy. So in case the original file is somehow corrupted somewhere, it will get rebuilt. So it has some auto recovery and redundancy built into cloud storage. So that's really amazing, because that by putting into cloud storage, you're now adding like it's almost 2 more spots. So now you're in 4 locations with your data. So that's like super data archiving and protection. So that's something to think about, is putting into the cloud storage. So sometimes if you're, again, low on space, you could then start to have your archive drive, put stuff in the cloud drive, and then you have multiple backups. Because again, treat the cloud drive, it has its own backup in place. You'll never lose anything in cloud drive storage. That's how it's designed, and to make sure, because a lot of companies, businesses rely on their data being secured, stored, and safe, and not just that it would disappear overnight. So it's really important that cloud storage is at the highest, most level. So now think about what kind of cloud storage you're using, what's available. So typically you'll see things like, there's the iCloud that Apple offers. So that's a great big company, solid company, not going anywhere. Then there's things like the Google Drive. So that's like an online storage system as well. So there's that. So any kind of these major players are great. If you're using something that's maybe new and up and coming, that's great. You can support that. But just think about what happens if that company were ever to close in your cloud storage. Where would your archives go? So there's kind of that thing of the necessity of really going with these larger companies that are just have the bandwidth and power to keep going with the cloud storage. That's really important. So how does it look if we're going to format drive? So let's have a quick look at that. I'm going to just go over to we talked about that earlier. So where do we find this? And people ask this oftentimes. Where can I go to format my drive? So I'm just going to plug in a drive here. An external drive, I'm plugging it into the computer. Now to format your drives, what you do is you go to the Launchpad. There's a thing over here called Other. In the Launchpad, go to Other. And then we find something called Disk Utility. And this shows you where all your drives are. So you can see right now I have a Macintosh hard drive. It's only 256 gigs. This is a solid state drive, internal drive. And again, you can see it's it doesn't have tons of space available. But used is there, and then there's another volume I think attached in here, free 147 gigs. And here's like my data volume, and so on. So you can see how that makes up that drive. Now here this is the RAID drive. So you can see this is what it looks like. So there's 4 2-terabyte drives, 8 terabytes in total, right? And you can see that it's listed as a RAID, right? It's a volume. And again, this is all Apple formatted, APFS. So these are the Apple, the Mac operating system based ones. And then I can delete the RAID. But so this RAID, right? It's online, Stripe set RAID 0. So RAID 0 means there's no backups on it at all. So that means it's just for speed and storing the most amount of data possible. You can do what is a RAID 1, and what that will do is it will take the 8 terabytes and make it into 4 terabytes, and that way it has a constant backup, if you will, of the original 4 terabytes onto the other 4 terabytes. So it can be rebuilt. So it's constantly doing its own backup. So that's really important for, again, data management. If you're really worried, archiving materials, you can do what's a RAID 1 then, something to consider. So again, or you can use the multiple drives like I'm suggesting. I have another one here. This is another RAID, and this is built with 4 1-terabyte solid state drives. And again, so you can see how that's built up. A RAID 0, super fast, 4 terabytes. This allows me to work in resolutions up to 8K in resolution comfortably right now. It's able to do, and that's with the solid state drive. So you can see it's really powerful. The other RAID system can do 4K, and that's what generally with Thunderbolt 3 and some RAID drives or solid state drives, you can comfortably do the 4K editing. And that brings me back to, again, what do we use for the creator space? When you go to libraries, you will access a small external hard drive that you can plug in, or some already come with the hard drives there. They're either a RAID drive or a solid state drive. So they've been designed to do 4K video and really, zip through photos and, digital illustration. You can work on animation processing, things like that. So that's really important again as well. So, high-speed Thunderbolt 3, RAID drives give you even more speed for editing, but Thunderbolt 3 itself is a very fast speed, and then the solid state drive gives you the utmost speed possible. So that's something that you can be investing in if you're looking at, hey, I need to get a new drive, consider getting the solid state external drive instead of a regular hard drive if you need it for a working drive, so something to work your data off of. But again, if you go into the library partners, you're covered. We have the external drives that you get when you go to use the computers, and you can use as your working drive in that particular manner there. So, okay, so now if I go to here, how do we go to, this is a 5 terabyte drive, and how do we go to format it? So I'd go to erase. You can rename it, and then you see it gives you all the different information here. So I'm going to cancel that. I can also go to partition. I can swap it out, and so on. So if I erase it right now, you can see it's only giving me the Mac formatted ones. But if I do an erase first, we can delete this volume, and then I can create an exFAT. So this is the disk utility. This is where basically you can do all of your formatting of the exFAT or the APFS, which is the standard current Mac OS formats. So right here you can see there's encrypted, case sensitive, so different ones. I'm just using the standard APFS. Right, so that's in terms of data management. So again, this one's like a live backup. You can see that I have, everything's always organized, so I have like the concert filming dates, raw footage, logos, right? Keeping everything organized and labeled. And that's really important for your data management as well. So that's really great to know and understand. So that's where you do all your formatting and working on that kind of stuff. Now in terms of the project files versus projects, and this is an important discussion. So if you look at what a project file will look like, I'm going to open this up here. Just going to get this drive going, and project files versus projects. Again, as I mentioned just from off the top, the project file won't be that big. So there's if you think of even like photos or a project file, that's a lot different. But in the video world, I have some. Where are Resolve projects? Here we go. Resolve projects right here. Okay, so here's a Resolve project, Advanced Narrative Film Editing .drp, and that's a DaVinci Resolve project. Now the total size of this is only 1.2 megabytes. Pretty small. That can be emailed and so on. And that can contain hundreds of hours of footage and so on. But what it's doing is it's a project file. So the project file is linking to all the media, but it doesn't actually contain the media. Now this differs because if you're used to things like Photoshop or graphic type work, that project file contains all the materials. It's not usually linking to it, with some exceptions. So a Photoshop file could be, for example, 200 megabytes because it has all the materials in it. So that file itself, if you save it over to somewhere and send it, you can download it and open it all up with the materials. It doesn't have to link to external media. So that's the project file versus the actual project media or final project. So if I have the DaVinci Resolve project, I send that to you, all you can do is you'll open it, but you won't be able to see anything unless you have the 4 terabytes of media that has to be associated with that. So that's something to think about. So what we want to always do is in terms of project management and backups, we want to always have these Resolve projects, Affinity Photo projects, Procreate, any kinds of projects we can export just as the project and save those. And those will be smaller than the whole project in most cases. And same with like Pro Tools or sound editing software, those will be smaller, and then the media is an additional thing to it. But remember this is the whole thing about data management and backup, is that you have to get, have that media somewhere. So you're gonna have to always relink to the media in order to open up the project and go back to the media. So that's really important in terms of the backups and the media storage and archiving and making sure that you stay organized. So that's the project file versus the project, and I think that's always a really important consideration. So I think I have here are here's another one right here. We're going to just open. So this is in some of the book publishing workshops we've done. So narrative editing still for book exports. So here's like the PDFs. So that's like kind of, you know, your final printing material. They're in the megabytes. And then instead, I'm going to look over here. And then here's the designer demo, 1.1 megabytes, right? So it's always smaller in the file sizes in terms of what it's going to look like. So again, here's like a webinar Photoshop, 1.7 megs, Affinity in the Photoshop mode, and then here's just like the images themselves, the JPEG. So you can see that project file ends up being bigger because it has all the different layers. So always make sure you're doing backups of the project files as well, because then whatever you did in the software, you need that project file, not just the media. I can't rebuild an editing sequence, a sound edit or mix, or a graphic file unless I have that specific software's project file. And that's really the key, is the project file. The other key will be in the future. That's why the key is to get that export of a final master as well. There could be an issue where maybe that software no longer exists and you can't open it. That can happen. The legacy can be gone. But generally, a lot of things that we're using and we're recommending are using these tried, tested, and long-term file formats. So we've seen like the PSD, the Photoshop document, the things like the Illustrator files, the DaVinci Resolve. I mean, this is decades-long software, so the longevity is there. So that's always the key, is having those project files so you can reopen your media. Really, really crucial in your data management. Then the last thing that I want to talk about is the data and privacy and protection and how we work with things. So if you're using the CreatorSpace project computers, the iMac computers at our library partners, one thing to remember is that your project files, if you store them on your external drive, you want to make sure that everything's on your external drive, your final project's on your external drive. Otherwise, you're leaving it out there for public. It's open. So your privacy is not protected if you keep things open. Another thing with the any kind of public space computers is doing those backups, protecting it, and also things could be lost. So let's say you take out the external drive, you're working on things, and then there's something gets someone else comes to use external drive. They could potentially, not intentionally or not in a malicious manner, but just delete your files because they need space on the drive. So just say, okay, I'm going to delete this. It's using up the whole terabyte solid state drive. So I'm going to delete something. And then your stuff's gone. So it's really important for privacy and project management and the public shared access use of a computer to make sure you have your backups and that's being stored appropriately and it's somewhere so that you don't find that it's gone. Now what's also happening is we're working with the libraries. So Collingwood Public Library, we're testing this out, but they're using something called Deep Freeze. What happens is you log in, you use the computer, and only the external drives will be unaffected. But if you leave anything on the internal drive, the working computer's drive, it will be deleted. So project files and things like that will be deleted. So again, it's really important to back up your project file or work on the project file on the external drive. The external drives won't be affected. So even the ones you take from the computer, for the computer from the libraries and you have it on the computers, those ones will never be affected. It's only going to be that internal working drive. So here's the thing. I know it's always tempting. We do it. I do it. I have a lot of things, desktops, download folders, things like that. We might leave stuff in there that's important. So desktop should really just be, okay, it's your desktop you're working on the day. At the end of the day, your desktop should be clean. So think of it as your working desk, right? If there's a big mess on it, and it's a shared desk, shared office spaces. We're getting used to these shared spaces. The next person that comes in is going to take the stuff on your desktop and move it along to the side, maybe throw it out. So, and that's what Deep Freeze does, or that's what other users can do on your desktop. So always clean the desktop if you're not the only one using the computer. And it's a good practice to clean your desktop anyways, to have everything always onto these external drives, cloud storage, organizing, and then you're just keeping stuff on the desktop that is just what you're currently working on for that day instead of it building up. So that's really a great word of advice. Again, I always have a bunch of things on the desktop too, so it's a struggle sometimes. But I'm looking at what they are, and right now they're a lot of the demo things that I'm doing for these workshops. So that's where they're just on the desktop as the current. But otherwise, everything goes onto the hard drives. So you'll see like things when I go to the hard drives here. You see all these projects are just everything's in this hard drive instead of on the desktop. So overall, you'll see the desktop, it just has a few things, some manuals, some designer, some of the demo things. This is all just for the Creatorspace workshops, but otherwise it's empty. And that's how you want to make sure you're working with your data management. Have it all backed up. Don't leave it on the desktop because then it's going to disappear. So that's really important for privacy. And then the other thing with your data management is, and in terms of the privacy, is consider having the files you back up and then just erasing them so you can get rid of them ahead on your own. So get rid of anything, log out of things if you're logged into anything using like libraries for stock photos or music. Log out of everything. The deep freeze system will log you out automatically of all your browsers, but if you're using generally computers, you want to log out of everything, and then that's protecting your privacy and your assets, and have everything backed up, external drive, and then erase it once you have it backed up from the desktop. If there is anything on the desktop, erase it from any of the internal drives, the library external drive. You can bring your own, or you can leave it on that external drive. The only thing is, in the library external drives, we can't guarantee that your data will stay protected there. So really important, if you can protect it, put it on some sort of a drive. And like I said, if you have a SD card, a spare one from a camera, you can put backups even on this. So this is 128 gigs. That's a lot. I can put a whole project file backups, DaVinci Resolve projects, media files, sound files, Pro Tools projects. I can load a lot of stuff on 128 gigs. Then look at getting a small little external drive like this. I'd really recommend. And the external drives, I'm not really going through to the thumb drives. I think the thumb drives get too small, and they're really not of major use. So if you need some more cards, this could be useful in your photography, video equipment, sound equipment. These are multi-purpose, so they're kind of great. A thumb drive you can't really use in one of those media devices. So that media drive, I think, is your go-to tool. Get your own external hard drive. About $100. It's a small investment, but you can really enjoy working on your digital arts projects and knowing that everything's safe. And then just look at what you have in your cloud storage and what's available, and keeping everything, your final masters there. Then they're safe for long term, and they're easy to share. And that's, I think, what's really important. Cloud storage is shareable. You can say, hey, here's my 2 gigabyte video. Share, send, done. The person on the other end can then download. Otherwise, 2 gigabyte, you have to send someone a drive by courier or mail. So the cloud storage really makes that collaborative and sharing possible. So that's for my data management. So that's all I have for today. So that's, again, the data management for digital arts. Really think about your data protection management, project archives, having everything backed up. Want to thank all our partners in this project. So we have the Canadian Council for the Arts and all our library partners, where you can access these iMac digital arts computers I've been talking about, the Blue Mountains Public Library, Collingwood Public Library, and the Wasaga Beach Public Library. So thanks for joining me again, and I will see you again soon. All the best.